Today we'll be discussing the life and works of Dr. Mamie Phipps Clarke. Mamie Phipps was born on October 18, 1917 in Hot Springs, Arkansas. She was born into an African-American middle-class family. Her father, Harold Phipps, was a physician, and her mother, Kate Florence Phipps, assisted in his practice. Mamie's only sibling, her younger brother, Harold, eventually became a dentist. While at Howard, Mamie met Kenneth B. Clarke, a master's student in psychology. Kenneth Clarke influenced Mamie to switch to psychology, and they eventually eloped during her senior year in 1937. And they later had 2 children, Kate in 1940 and Hilton in 1943. I also wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what Mamie was involved in outside of the field of psychology. So she served on several boards of trustees for different organizations and universities, such as Teachers College, Columbia University, Mount Sinai Medical Center, the New York Mission Society, the New York Public Library, the Phelps Stokes Fund, the Museum of Modern Art, the American Broadcasting Company, and on other advisory groups for nonprofit agencies. So as you can see, she was highly involved in other areas besides psychology as well. Next, we're going to talk about Mamie's educational history. So Mamie attended a segregated schooling for the duration of her early education. She graduated from Langston High School in 1934 and won scholarships to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and Howard University in Washington, D.C. She decided to attend Howard to initially study mathematics and physics. As I had mentioned earlier, she switched her degree to psychology due to her husband's swings, but also her interest in psychology, and she was also struggling with prejudice within her department. Mamie eventually received her bachelor's degree in psychology in 1938. She graduated with honors, Madam Cum Laude, and earned a graduate fellowship to enter Howard's master's degree program in psychology. So in describing her interest in psychology, she stated, "Well, I'd always had an interest in children, always, from the time I was very small. I'd always thought I wanted to work with children, and psychology seemed like a good field. I wasn't interested in teaching and such, or into going into education, and psychology seemed to offer potential in several different areas. I was interested in abnormal psychology, and that potentially was an area in which you could work in mental hospitals or, work in specialized settings with children. I was interested in the educational aspect of psychology, to be a school psychologist and work with children in elementary schools. The field had potentially more opportunities to work with children, and was very compatible with my interest in children." So, as you can see, these interests further inspired her to become the first African-American woman to receive her doctorate degree at Columbia University. And she received her degree in 1943. Next, we're going to talk about Mamie's research interests and contributions. So, Mamie's research interests began to further develop and specialize as she completed her master's thesis and dissertation. After graduating from Howard, Mamie worked as a secretary in the law office of William Houston. She then became interested in the work of William Hasty, Thurgood Marshall, and other legal activists in preparing civil rights cases that would ultimately be incorporated in the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision. Her master's thesis, The Development of the Consciousness in Negro Preschool Children, was completed in 1939. She used an experiment which demonstrated that young black children, when presented with identical dolls, one black and one white, preferred the white doll over the black doll. She found that black children became aware of their racial identity at about the age of 3, and simultaneously, with this awareness of racial identity, they acquired a negative self-image. So, this research paved the way for further research for the Brown v. Board of Education decision, as well as other research in regards to self-esteem and self-concept. If you would like to view a video clip of a modern-day example of this experiment, please click the link included within this slide. So, Mamie and her husband received a 3-year grant from Julius Rosenwald Fellowship Program in 1939 to research racial identification in black children. Mamie also entered the PhD program in psychology at Columbia University that same year. So Mamie was the only black student in the department, and she was sponsored by Dr. Henry Garrett. She completed her PhD in 1943, as I mentioned earlier, and the title of her dissertation was Changes in Primary Mental Abilities with Age. So now we're going to discuss her career, and despite being the first African-American woman to receive her PhD, Mamie struggled to find jobs. She was also often cited in literature saying that it was a little bit easier for her husband to find a job as a researcher or as a psychologist. But she stated that a black female with a PhD in psychology was an unwanted anomaly in New York City in the early 1940s. So as you can see, she was still struggling with adversity due to her race. She eventually found a job at the American Public Health Association analyzing data on American nurses, which she did not find fulfilling. The literature states that this wasn't the right fit for her, and she just didn't find it very interesting. In 1946, she became a testing psychologist at the Riverdale Home for Children, which is basically a private agency for the protection of black homeless girls. She found her niche here, but was disheartened that there were a lack of psychological services for minority children, many of whom were incorrectly identified as having intellectual disabilities. Although Mamie was unable to recruit help from local agencies to provide psychological services for the children at the Riverdale Home, that same year, Mamie and her husband opened the Northside Testing and Consulting Center, which later was called the Northside Center for Child Development, where they made important contributions to the understanding and treating of problems of minority children. So this center was the first full-time institution in the Harlem area that offered psychological and casework service to local families. I also just wanted to include an article which is basically an evaluation of some of her treatment programs that she used at the Northside Center. So in this article, a summer remedial program is basically just an evaluation of a reading and arithmetic programs within her treatment program at Northside Center. She established a modified version of the individualized education plan to establish individual goals for children along with individual teaching techniques. And although this initial evaluation of the program indicated several positive gains for most of the children, she includes a very special section within the article dedicated to children not progressing and possible hypotheses regarding their lack of gains. And I feel this just further emphasizes Mamie's strive to ensure progress for all groups and making sure that they're given the opportunity to excel in problem solving so that no child is left behind. So Clarke served as an executive director for the Northside Center from 1946 to 1979, and she died on August 11, 1983 at her home in New York City. So here's just a list of sources that I've used throughout my slides. I've cited within the slides whenever I've used direct quotations from an actual interview transcript, which is the Notable New Yorker's source. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in just getting more quotes and just learning more about Mamie and how she viewed her career as being the first African-American female psychologist. I also wanted to include a slide with a list of works that Mamie Clarke has either written herself or she's written with others. She's written a lot with her husband, Kenneth Clarke. So I wanted to include this list of works, and as I mentioned earlier, I included an actual snapshot of the PDF of the report on summer remedial program, which is done at her testing center at the Northside Center. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Mamie Phipps Clarke.